Hey YouTubers, it's me, Lonnie Clark, Nuts for Art, and I wanted to put out a video to you. Thank you for subscribing to me. I know I've been inconsistent. I always say that, but that's how it is, I guess, on my channel. I really appreciate you subscribing and paying attention to the things I report, though, and I talk about. And I know some people get mad at me because I talk about my political views, and people that really are anti-government think that I'm off my nut, because I believe fundamentally that humans are going to form some type of government. And the thing that made the United States so unique was that our country, in our framework, used the concept that we wouldn't torture people, which has now been thrown out since George Bush, and that we would take care of each other, which is now being thrown out by the Republicans. And actually by Americans. I've heard many a YouTuber say, well, I don't want to have to pay for them to go to school. I don't want to have to do this. And I don't want the government taking my money. I shouldn't have to pay for old people. I find that quite repulsive. And so as the people who find me repulsive, who believe that, because I believe that as a society, we ought to take care of each other. And in that vein, this is why I can't stop thinking about this reporting on all this nuclear stuff. So check this out. I'm going to share with you some stories that I found. Quite a shockaroo. Here we go. What does this say? How the Manhattan Project, yes, I think I have to go back. Excuse me. There we go. Present to everyone. How about that? And then I have to go back here so I can move around. And where were you, Mama? That one. Okay. How the Manhattan Project's nuclear suburbs stayed secret. You know what I love about this? Because this is one of my biggest things. We're still living in the nuclear secrecy. Oak Ridge, Tennessee, once home to 75,000, went up fast and under the radar, but it was built to last too. By Jessica Lee Hester, May 3rd, 2018. In the atlasobscura.com. Wow. Wonder what this lady died of. Some residents decorated their government-issued trailers with trellises and flowers. Oh, let's make it home, honey. That's our dear little sweat box. Bill Wilcox was proud of his town. He'd been there since the beginning, before farmland gave way to dormitories and houses and lawns. Before the ribbons of roads and sidewalks were laid down, before a single ball had rolled down a lane of a bowling alley, before it even had a name. When Wilcox arrived in this part of East Tennessee in 1943, soon after graduating from college with a degree in chemistry, he was among the first residents of the place that would eventually be called Oak Ridge. Wilcox lived there and worked there for decades, and he later became the town's historian. Can't imagine a better place to live, he told an interviewer in 2013, just like the fucking Stepford Wives. But Oak Ridge isn't like most other country suburbs, most of the country's other suburbs. The town was conceived and built by the United States government in the early 1940s as a base for uranium and plutonium work as part of the Manhattan Project. As the nuclear effort marched along, the town grew too. By 1945, a dense suburb had taken shape, roughly to home of 75,000 people. At war's end, Oak Ridge was the fifth largest city in the state, and now and all along it was supposed to be a secret. The government, in search of a site for a secret enclave, could do worse than Oak Ridge. The Clinch River ran nearby. Local topography provided a natural buffer, and East Tennessee offered an abundance of electrical power for engineers, since it had just been electrified by the New Deal. Do you get this? The United States government electrified East Tennessee. That speaks to all those people out there who say, I don't want to pay for this and I don't want to pay for that. The location, roughly 20 miles away from Knoxville, was relatively remote and close to train lines without being right on top of them. Before the government acquired 59,000 acres, the existing town, such as it was, consisted mostly of a patchwork of farmland nestled in valleys. By scattering work sites, the engineers reasoned they could hedge their bets against catastrophe. Even if something went terribly wrong at one site, perhaps the hills could contain a fire or an explosion. Are you kidding me? 59,000 acres in Tennessee are here spattered with goddamn nuclear waste. Wow. In 1942, before Oak Ridge was a nuclear factory town, it was a large farmland and homestead. Look at what it used to be, you guys. We have thrown our country away for nuclear waste. In 1942, the instructions of Leslie R. Groves, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers officer directing the Manhattan Project. This insane person is the traitor. Leslie R. Groves. Now we got a name. Okay, hold on. Let me copy that. I'm going to go here and I'm going to put his name in there, you filthy pig. We're going to do some research on you. Oh, this is the insane guy that was in that movie. Lord. Okay, let's go back to our story, though. Bing, where were you? Okay. In 1940, this guy was an insane guy, Leslie R. Groves. You should see his picture. There's a documentary called Half-Life, and he was watching the bombs go off the Marshall Islands. He was watching people get burnt, and he was smiling. His eyes were glowing with just insane maniac eyes. It was the most grotesque thing. And they acted like he should have been proud. Okay. In 1942, under the instructions of Leslie R. Groves, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers officer directing the Manhattan Project, the government approached the families that lived there, some of whom had owned farmsteads for generations, and summarily evicted them, said Martin Moeller Jr., the senior curator at the National Building Museum and organizer of the new exhibition, Secret Cities, the Architecture and Planning of the Manhattan Project. Oh, man. A few people filed lawsuits, but by and large, Moeller says the plan worked. Moeller chalks it up to one of the ruses that the organizers devised. They described the project as a quote, demolition range, unquote. So any possible holdouts could be scared off with the threat of near constant explosions. The lie was, quote, a relatively successful one that people didn't question, unquote, Miller says. After all, how could they have imagined what the government had in mind? That generally got people the hell out. Wow. So they just freaking bullied people all the way down the road. This is the Manhattan Project. This insane, this traitor, this despicable, filthy traitor. Oh, I'm going to do some research on him. By the time Wilcox arrived in October 1943, things were humming along. It was farmland, you could tell that, but there were construction going on everywhere you looked, he recalled. The first day he left a crick in his neck, he remembered, from shaking my head all day long. Streams of trucks and people and clanging and banging of tools, a smattering of signs that looked to the uninitiated like cryptographs. The roads weren't yet paved, and plank wood boardwalks stood in for sidewalks, for a little while at least. The town scaled up fast. The laboratories took most of the space, but rather than constructing basic dormitories for employees, the architects and designers settled on a suburban vision, a cluster of single-family homes on the part of the property about 1 mile wide and 6 miles long. It was considered vital that these very sophisticated scientists and engineers should feel very comfortable right away, Miller said. Their work, including producing enriched uranium, was difficult, he adds, and that it was determined that they should have all the comforts of a real town in order to work as effectively as possible. Wow. A Type H house photographed in the 1940s. Here's our little home, dear. Let's plan the destruction of America. To pull this off quickly and without attracting too much attention, the architects relied on prefabricated and semi-fabricated housing. In some cases, a house might come in two halves on the back of a truck to be assembled on site. Oak Ridge also included many cemesto homes made from panels of cement and asbestos. These were also called alphabet houses because of their various iterations named. A house were fairly moderate, for instance, while D houses, including dining rooms. Fairly modest means what? A little one-room shack like this. This is an A house. This is for the janitors, and the D houses is for the scientists. What the F, man? Bah! Housing choices were generally associated with seniority. I was right, though allowances were sometimes made for large families. None of these dwellings were exactly luxurious, but even at the height of anxiety about the demise of Western civilization, Muller says, architects were prioritizing nice, basic, comfortable American suburban houses. Let me read that again. None of these dwellings were exactly luxurious, but even at the height of anxiety about the demise of Western civilization, Muller says, architects were prioritizing nice, basic, comfort, American comfortable suburban houses. So this is all based on the total anxiety people had about the nuclear threat from the Russians. At least for some, while white employees lived in relatively cushy digs, their black counterparts were more likely placed in structures known as hutments, little more than plywood frames without indoor plumbing. Segregation was actually designed from the start, Muller says. Holy shit! Black workers at Oak Ridge often lived in hutments, which were much less comfortable than the other prefabricated models. Holy crap. Look at how the black people had to live. Look at that's their windows, which is cardboard lifted up and screen doors and cardboard houses and no running water, and the water's outside. Wow. The demand for new homes continued to boom, and people were temporarily housed in apartments, dorms, and trailers. At the height of the building frenzy, a contractor turned over the keys to a new home every 30 minutes. The pace of building was stunning enough, but doing it all under the radar required a little willful blindness. The town didn't appear on any official maps, and visitors were screened by guards posted at the entrances. Still, at that scale, it couldn't truly be clandestine. People saw stuff, certainly, Muller says, but probably chose not to wonder too deeply about what was happening out there out of a combination of patriotism and ignorance. Muller speculates that those who saw workers and supplies streaming into the site may have sensed that asking too many questions would have been un-American. The idea, it's not my business, it's for the war effort, he says. There's a much greater spirit of national unity than we could even fathom now. Wow. Look what this says. What you see here, what you do here, what you hear here, when you leave here, let it stay here. Oh dear. That's Uncle Sam telling us to lie to people. Billboards like this, when photographed in 1943, reminded workers to keep their work confidential. Wow. Billboards were installed all over town to remind workers to keep their mouths shut about their work, even though most workers knew very little about the project's true scope. Even if a loose-lipped employee had divulged minor things, Miller adds, it would really take a lot of details to add up to the full picture. The general public was familiar with the concept of X-rays and radioactivity, but the bomb and its potential would have been mind-boggling. No one could have imagined you could make this super bomb using these tiny atoms of materials, Mueller says. Similar secret cities were built in other parts of the country, such as Los Alamos, New Mexico, and Hanford, Washington, home to 125,000 people. All of these places, you guys, all of them are full of toxic waste and are a complete disaster still. Designers of these towns had additional tactics to obscure specifics. In Los Alamos and Hanford, sometimes everyone was given the same mailing address. At Oak Ridge, street addresses were designed to be confusing to outsiders. Bus routes might be called X10 or K25 or Y12 in reference to the factories they led to, while dorms had simple names such as M1, M2, M3. If you didn't already know where you were trying to go, none of it would make sense. There weren't any signs on buildings, just numbers, code names, and numbers. Wilcox recalled, the town was full of such ciphers, and even employees didn't know how to decode them all. Wow. Look at this home. I guess this is a D home, right? What is this one known? This is called the flat top. Oh, this is a B1 model home. The architecture structure of Skidmore, Owings, and Mills oversaw the building of Oak Ridge, including semi-fabricated home like this B1 model known as the flat top. That's the flat top. There you go. Cozy little home, government home. At Oak Ridge is no secret anymore. Its streets opened to the public in 1949. The Atomic Energy Commission helped to get a city council off the ground, and the town incorporated a decade later. Now it shows up on maps and census records, 29,000 people, just like any other American town. But even today, with no secrecy at all, the Department of Energy remains the main employer. And in 2012, a gaggle of peace activists, including an elderly nun, breached and vandalized a facility there that stores some of the most dangerous nuclear material in the world. Oh, wow. Listen to this. Let me repeat this. She's talking about Sister Megan Rice. But even today, with no secrecy at all, the Department of Energy remains the main employer. And in 2012, a gaggle of peace activists, including an elderly nun, a gaggle of peace activists. It was Sister Megan Rice and two of her other activists. They were both elderly men. Breached and vandalized a facility there that stores some of the most dangerous nuclear material in the world. What they did was actually take baby's blood and spill it on the nuclear power, on the nuclear storage site that said nuclear kills. And they took a chunk of the building with a hammer and took a tiny piece of it, like a little rock size, and waited to get arrested. And they spent probably 3 years in jail. They recently got out. You can Google Sister Megan Rice. Look at this. I bet all of those children grew up to have cancer. After the war, some of the most prefabricated houses, like this A version house, photographed in 1957, were transformed with brick and siding. Wow. For all the speed with which it went up, many of Oak Ridge's homes turned out to be built to last. Drive around the east end of the town today and you'll see many Semestos houses still standing, says Ray Smith, who became the town historian around 3 years ago after Wilcox passed away. When the town was incorporated, he says, many of the homes were sold to the people who had, up to that point, been renting them from the government. They may have been transformed with a new little brickwork or siding, but the old alphabet system is alive and well. Oak Ridgers can say, oh, that's a B house, My grandmother lives in a D house, Miller says. They don't think anything is unusual about that. Holy crap. After the war, Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill continued to design homes, schools, and other buildings in Oak Ridge. These post-war homes were photographed in 1948. Wow. Hmm. Those intimidating billboards about betraying your country with loose lips are long gone, and the town now proudly broadcasts its past. One of its major summer events is the Secret City Festival, a weekend of parades, concerts, and tours of the federal facilities. It's the only time during that year that we can gain access, Smith said. Some secrets continue to fascinate even when they're out in the open. And what about some that continue to poison? That is just unbelievable. So people live in these places still. That is a shock. Okay, so here we are. Fast forward. Let's go and see what's going on. Kids, I don't know how long that was, but I really wanted to show you this. This came out just yesterday or today, updated 18 hours ago, May 3rd. Cracks in Scottish nuclear core prompt safety checks. A reactor at EDF Energy's Hunterston's B nuclear power plants in Scotland will remain offline for additional safety checks after cracks were found in its core, the Britain's Office for Nuclear Regulatory said. Holy moly. Sorry, guys. This is not good. You know what it is? We have this secrecy. Even here, they're not talking about the negative health effects of the people who live there. Let's us do that. Cancer rates. Oak Ridge. Cancer rates. Here we go. They're going to tell us, don't worry, it's no much higher. This is an abstract. Oak Ridge, Tennessee is the site of two of the oldest nuclear facilities in the United States. Although precise records have not been maintained, low levels of radioactive products have been released into the environment since the facility began operating it since World War II. Changes in age-adjusted cancer mortality rates for whites among the periods 1952 and 1987 to 89 were analyzed to assess whether these radioactive releases have had adverse effects on the population living near Oak Ridge. Results indicate that the increases in the local area under 100 miles from Oak Ridge exceeded the regional increases and far exceeded national increases. Within the region, increases were greatest in the rural areas in Anderson County, where Oak Ridge is located, and the mountainous counties in the region downwind of Oak Ridge. Each of these findings suggests that low levels of radiation ingested gradually by local residents were a factor in the increases in local cancer death rates. Results indicate that more studies of this type are called for and that the cessation of all future radioactive emissions from nuclear facilities should be considered. Wow. Mangano. Look at this. Look at all the work this man's done. I think this is Joseph Mangano. JJ, I don't know who that is. Anyways, you guys, let me stop sharing. I'm going to get back to you. I am actually just quite stunned about that story about the Manhattan Project, that they don't even talk about the negative effects of people's health. And that's part of the Manhattan Project. That's why I thought that story was really fascinating, because even in talking about the Manhattan Project, there's still secrecy. There's still, like, let's don't mention it. There's still that unspoken truth. And yet, the first story we pull up when we research cancer rates in Oak Ridge is that, yes, indeed, it's much higher. So I'm kind of like over us talking about this. How do we stop it? That's the question. How are we going to gang together, and how are we going to impress upon our elected officials and upon the military and everybody that is involved in this? How do we change their minds? I mean, this is our biggest challenge, because it's evident that we have this increase in cancer, increase of schizophrenia, increase in diabetes. I mean, there's a host of things that happens with constant, continual, low-level radioactivity. And we just can't give up on this. The challenge is hard. You know, it's when things seem worse that you must not quit, right? Often the goal, what's that poem say, you know? When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems uphill, funds are low and the debts are high, and you want to sigh, but you want to sigh, but you want to stop, but you want to sigh, or something like that. It's when things get worse that we must not quit. And it's worse. It's getting worse by the day. When people say it's coming, no, folks, it's here. So it's time for us to pay attention to articles like the one I just read and figure out what can we do. I personally have written a letter to my 2 senators and my congressman, asked them for an appointment. And I called to make an appointment, but they wouldn't. I had to write a letter. So now I'm waiting for them, see if that happens. I have been calling them. That hasn't seemed to help. Maybe we're at the point of no return, but I don't know. I don't know what we can do, but there is something we've got to do, because it is an urgent thing that we stop this train from hitting the brick wall completely. And the nuclear waste thing is huge. It's not just a small secret like in Oak Ridge. Oh, yeah, people are living in houses that are radioactively contaminated. St. Louis, same thing. Same thing in Hanford. San Onofre. I mean, all these places. And that people act as if it's not a big deal. Anyways, you guys, thanks for watching. Put your courage feet on. And I'm giving you the peace sign because we believe in peace, because we want peace. Oh, we'll do this. We'll stand like this for 2 minutes, right? That's what they say. Put your arms up in a V shape. You stand like that for 2 minutes. So I'm going to do that when we end. Stand up for 2 minutes and think about what we want. What we want us to do is save our planet and see the earth healing itself and humans healing itself, and us reclaiming our humanity and loving each other and treating each other with kindness and understanding, and not going after each other like malicious animals if we disagree with each other. We can treat each other with respect and still disagree. So, well, I'm going to come back to you guys, I hope, more frequently. Put your courage feet on, you guys. Thanks for joining me. Subscribe and put your thumbs up, not the thumbs down, thumbs up. We want thumbs up. We want thumbs up. And we want subscribers, because we got to change this. We got to make it go viral. So like so many people know about this channel, and they're like, oh my gosh, we have to stop those nuclear people. Bye, you guys. Ciao.